All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to be here with you, and we're thrilled to kick off our Summer Learning Framework webinar series. This is topic number 1 out of 9 different topics, and we'll be hosting a series of webinars and providing some planning tools, talking with our districts and some national and state experts in summer learning. And so we are incredibly grateful and thankful that you are taking time out of your very, very busy day to be with us and to learn a little bit more about summer learning, and then hopefully have you all walking away with some tools and some resources and some additional expertise to help you plan for a high quality summer learning program. I'm going to just start with some quick introductions of the folks that you are with today. So if we could pop over to that next slide. So my name is Andrew Hodge. I'm Director of Innovative Instructional Models at Texas Education Agency, joined by a couple of TEA colleagues, Brian Dorn and Shaylin Macedonio. We're very grateful to be here through the support of the Wallace Foundation, who has enabled us to connect with some experts in summer learning through RAND, and we have Catherine Augustus here today. In the learning agenda, we have Katie Wilsey and Hillary Oravec that are also with us today. Before we do get started, just a few housekeeping things. One is we're recording this webinar, so it will be posted by the end of the day on texashomeLearning.org/summer, where we're hosting all of these resources. So we'll be popping back and forth from slides to that actual site, so that you'll be able to actually go in and get some of the tools that we're talking about and see some district examples directly on that site, texashomeLearning.org/summer. We do want this to be as engaging as possible for us. We are on a webinar, but at the same time, and bummed that we can't be in person, but at the same time, want to make sure that we are answering your questions and gathering your insights so that we can turn them around and post them for other folks to see. So we will actually be utilizing the chat function today. So there will be several times where we pause and ask for something that you learned and something that you heard. And we would love for you to just throw that in the chat. Also, if you do have questions, we have several folks monitoring the chat as well. And we'll be able to get directly to those questions and answer them for you during our time today. So once again, this webinar will be posted on texashomeLearning.org/summer, in addition to the rest of our Summer Learning Framework webinar series. So this is the Summer Learning Framework, and if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the Summer Learning Framework is actually composed of 3 main components. One is this statewide webinar series. This covers everything from design, academics, and operations for summer learning. This is led by some folks at TEA and folks like Rand and Learning Agenda as national experts in this field. It will also include planning resources, tools, templates. These are things that we're populating over the course of this series. I do want to highlight here, if you do have an excellent planning resource tool or template that you think that other districts would benefit from seeing, go ahead and send it to us at texashomeLearning.org. Send it to us at texashomeLearning@tea.texas.gov so that we can take a look and post it for folks to be able to use, and so that we can all benefit from the collective impact of all of us. And then in addition to that, with the academic side of things for summer learning, we do have Texas Home Learning summer specific units that will be posted this week. And then next week, actually, the publishers will be going deep into those individual units, giving folks an overview, allowing you to ask questions about how they can and should be used. And then just generally being there as a resource for you as additional support for your academic component. We do also want to highlight, if you're interested in the Texas Home Learning summer units, but you want additional material support and stipends, we have an initiative called the COVID Recovery Instructional Material Support Initiative. You can find that on our website, and Brian will go over that here in a little bit. Just for that additional support, it's an added opportunity that we think is really helpful for folks. I want to be very transparent here. These are all presented as optional resources for folks. We know there are folks that are across the state that are in very different contexts, also very different timelines, and that's okay. So we plan to put these together as an optional support and resource for y'all. To the extent that they're helpful, use them. To the extent that they're not, don't use them. But regardless, we think that we can be helpful for y'all, and would love your feedback either way. So want to look ahead a little bit. on the next slide to the upcoming Summer Learning Framework webinars. So we are in the Designing for High Quality Summer Learning. You'll see the rest of the design and implementation webinars are this week, all at 11 a.m. And led by folks that are on this call. Academics and enrichment will be next week. And also we're peppering in the operational items next week as well to walk you through budgeting for summer master scheduling and summer site operations. Again, you can register for all of these or watch the recording when they're available at texashomelearning.org/summer. But we'd love to get into the reason why y'all are here today, which is, drum roll on the next slide, the process, the whole process. And so as we did mention that this is a kind of a comprehensive framework that you can use as you see fit, but we have created a tool that is based on research from national leaders like Rand about what all does it take in order to plan for a summer learning program. And so today we're going to focus really on those top two categories. But the rest of the next couple of weeks and the rest of the framework will focus on all of the planning categories that you can, again, use as you see fit. And then there's modified timelines for kind of a 3-month planning timeline. Hear from a lot of folks that their summer school is going to start around June 1st. So we've kind of backwards planned from there. But you can access this tool at texashomelearning.org/summer. And then over the next week or so, we are going to be digging in a little bit deeper to each individual component of this tool. Really, though, want to make sure that we're understanding the research behind it and how that research plays into this tool and helps you kind of operationalize that research, which is what we're going to kick off with today. So with that, I'm very excited to turn it over to Catherine Augustus, Katie Wilsey, and Hillary Orvek, who are going to walk us through some of the findings from a RAND study and some information that folks have been able to gather from working with districts and other summer learning experts in the field. And then ultimately we'll come back and walk through that tool. But very excited, again, that y'all are here with us today, but that we also get to work alongside these experts, and excited for their support. And without further ado, love to kick it over to y'all.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Texas. I wish I was there with you in person for many reasons, including that it was 30 degrees here in Pittsburgh when I woke up this morning. So I'm going to go through a set of slides, but we will all be taking turns. And as Andrew said, please put your questions in the chat so we can get to those as well. So you're all here focused on summer. So I don't think I have to spend much time convincing you that summer does offer a unique opportunity for students. It's a time to promote both academic achievement and provide what we will refer to in these slides as enrichment opportunities. I know that word is used in a lot of different ways. We mean it, and there might be a better term for this, but we mean it as opportunities to participate in the arts or sports or skill development in a particular field. And recent research, unfortunately, confirms that kids, youth, students who are experiencing poverty have different summer experiences than their higher income peers. They're less likely to be able to join a camp or a private club or a sports opportunity. And as well, you've all heard about the summer slide. So some of that research now is showing that kids don't across the board lose ground over the summer, which is great. But students living in poverty tend to do worse academically. They might not learn as much during the summer, or they might indeed fall behind their peers and actually, go backwards a little bit or slide back during the summer. So districts across your lovely state and across the country for that matter are looking right now in particular at summer learning programs given the pandemic we've all experienced. And as you all know, there's new federal funding coming to help with that. So it's not surprising that the federal government has recognized that expanding time for learning, and including in the summer, is an opportunity that should be taken advantage of. So at RAND, I have done with my colleagues a lot of different studies on summer, and I'm going to dive into one, but I wanted just to say a couple of things about um, the other work we've done. So we have spent a lot of time looking at academic summer programs provided by school districts. So that's primarily what I'm going to talk about. But we've looked at other summer programs as well and found positive impacts from them, programs that were focused on emotional well-being, which is also particularly important now, as well as employment and career oriented summer programs. So again, I'm mainly going to be focused on academic programs here, but you all should feel free to reach out to me at any time if you want to ask questions about those other types of programs. So the evaluation or study I'm going to draw from was funded by the Wallace Foundation. They launched a national summer learning project back in 2011. So at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of research on whether summer programs provided by districts that were voluntary, right? So not the remedial programs where kids were at threat of grade retention, whether they could actually benefit kids, and if so, how exactly they did so. So they launched a project in 2011 in which they provided funding for the 5 school districts listed here on this slide, including Dallas, where I spent a lot of time during this time period. And we were brought in to be the evaluators of these summer programs. You can see a reference to our study here on this slide, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So in this program, we followed 5,600 students starting when they were in 3rd grade. So in the spring of 2013, they were in 3rd grade, and we followed them through 7th grade. So that was who we looked at in these cities. And they were all, for the most part, students experiencing poverty. They were all in urban centers. And again, we started following them when they were in the spring of 3rd grade, when they were recruited into programs that looked like this. So these were programs offered by all 5 of these school districts that were full day. They ran 5 to 6 weeks. They were free for families. Students were served in both academics and enrichment, as I talked about earlier, in small classes of no more than 15 kiddos. The teachers who were instructing on academics, which in this particular case was both mathematics and reading, they were teachers from that school district who were certified as elementary teachers, and in some cases in those subjects, if that was relevant for that state. And each day, the kids got in that full day program 3 hours of math and reading, not each combined. And then they had enrichment activities every day. So they were bike riding, they were swimming, they were playing water polo, they were doing flag football, they were putting on plays, they were experiencing other kinds of arts. They were rock climbing, they were playing sand volleyball. So they were doing a lot of that as well. The meals were free. The kids all had breakfast, lunch, and a snack, and they all had busing. That was free as well. So this was a randomized controlled trial, meaning that of those 5,600 kiddos, about half, we were able to get a little bit more than half, went through these programs, and the other half remained in what we call the control group. And this was palatable for the parents in these communities because these programs couldn't serve all the kids who applied anyway. So the kids were selected through a lottery and then either went through this program or participated in something else. And I could talk about what that something else was if you have questions about that. So how did we study these programs? I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but we did a lot, as you can see here, a lot of interviews, a lot of surveys. We were in the programs every day. Like I said, I was in Dallas quite a bit. We were in the classrooms. We were observing the programs from when the kids first got there in the morning until they were dismissed at the end of the day. And then we had a lot of administrative data too. So attendance data, assessment data, et cetera. So what did we find? Here's our key reveal slide. So we did find that these programs benefited the students who attended them, and that's good news. So we saw after the first summer, and I think I forgot to say that this was a 2-summer model. So the kids who were given an offer to attend in the spring of 3rd grade, that offer was for the summer before they were in 4th grade and the summer before they were in 5th grade. So 2 summers in a row. And after that first summer, we saw that all of the kids who had been given that offer to attend outperformed the control group in math. And what they gained, that difference, was about 15% of what students at that age would learn in math throughout the school year. And that's to be expected given that these were 5 to 6 week programs. Now, after the second summer, so after the kids had gone through 2 summers, those students who had attended in both summers for 20 or more days in each summer. So remember, these programs were 25 to 30 days long. So those kids who had attended for 20 or more days in both summers not only outperformed the control group in math, but also in reading and in social and emotional learning as well. So you can see from this third bullet that there's really a theme here, right? So the students had to attend, which is kind of a no duh, but it's hard, and as I'll say in a minute, to get students to attend regularly when it's not mandatory. And they had to receive a certain amount of instruction. And so that amount happened to be 25 hours in math and 34 hours in reading. And you might say, well, that's easy peasy. I can offer a program with 25 hours of math and or 34 hours of reading. But when you factor in attendance as well as time lost between what's planned, what's put in the schedule and what actually happens, it's not as easy as you might think to get to these hours. I'll say more about that. But anyway, those kids who hit those attendance and what we call dosage amounts also outperform the control group in the spring on the state assessment. So that gain they got in the summer, we didn't just see in the fall immediately after the summer, but that it was perpetuated and the kids continued to benefit throughout the school year. All right, so we've published a lot of stuff on this study. The publication in the very middle in red is the one I was just talking about, which describes the study and our findings. And then the publication that's circled on this slide is the one I'm going to move to next. So because we had done all of those observations and surveys and interviews, we felt like we had really dug into these programs and we had a lot to say about why they worked and how they worked. And so in that publication, which all of these publications, by the way, are free. You can download them from RAND's website, rand.org, and from the Wallace Foundation's website as well. So that document is basically split up into these 8 chapters. So we devote a chapter to planning, how to recruit students, how to select teachers, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be going through most of these sections, not for long, but briefly in just a second. And so this is the publication that I'm drawing from. And there are, in the summer learning framework that Andrew was describing, there are tools and there are templates that are aligned to these recommendations that I'm about to talk about. So there will be lots of ways for you to continue to engage in this. Obviously, you can download that report for free. You will have access to the summer learning framework, of which this webinar is a part. And you can also go back to these slides, or this presentation, which I know is being recorded. All right, so we're not going to talk about early planning. It's March, it's almost April, and you might be planning something for this summer, which is great. And I could answer questions about what might work given this shortened planning timeframe. But we usually suggest that planning begin in September, January at the latest. So I'm going to skip over that and start with recruiting students, which might be top of mind for you right now. All right, so in recruiting students, a recommendation that we would give you would be to provide compelling, information for parents, but also accurate. So a lot of the programs, when we first started studying them back in 2011, before we launched the RCT, wanted only to promote the fun part, right? So there would be on the brochures and in communications with kids, lots of information about the sailing part of the program or the rock climbing part of the program. And then when the kids got there and realized that they were in a math class, they were not very happy. So you want to get the kids and parents, you want them to understand the rationale for the program. If you're doing an academic program, that this is an academy. It's going to help you prepare for the next school year, and it will also be fun. So that's where the word accurate comes in. So we studied a lot of different incentives used for students to attend regularly. Again, these programs were not mandatory. And so a lot of parents wanted to pull their kids out, for a week to attend another camp, like a football camp or go on vacation, or their grandparents were coming into town. So the incentives that seemed to work for students were ones where the whole class would get a prize on Friday if all the kids had attended every day that week. Because there was sort of that peer pressure. Like you'll get an ice cream social party on Friday if everyone attends, so that the kids were pressuring each other to come. But you might want to experiment and see what kinds of incentives work for your students. And we also saw that students attended more in the sites where there was a more positive climate. Again, that's probably kind of a no duh finding. But because we were in these programs every day, all day, we were able to develop a rubric that monitored the climate of the site, meaning the quality, the warmth of the interactions between students and adults and among students with each other. And we, as you can see on this slide, if we saw a negative site climate, the average daily attendance was lower than if we saw a positive site climate. And that's a pretty big difference, the 79% average daily attendance versus the 86% average daily attendance. All right, I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Katie, who will read some questions from the chat, and I might answer them, or Katie or others on this call are welcome to as well.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. I'm Katie Wilsey with the Learning Agenda. As Andrew introduced, we're part of the technical assistance team that worked with Wallace and Rand on the National Summer Learning Project. And we're working with TEA around the development and launch of this summer learning framework. As Andrew mentioned, we'll be leading the different design and implementation webinars that will be happening throughout this week. And so we're happy to be here with you all today and help facilitate some questions and engage some more conversation in the chat to really help make connections between Rand's research and the summer learning framework. And so before we turn to some of the questions that have come through, we'd love to learn a little bit more about the programs that you're planning or how you're thinking about messaging and engaging your families. And so we invite you to share in the chat, how you're thinking about your program and what aspects are really going to be most appealing for families and students. As you think about that attendance is key, what do you think is going to really get them excited to sign up and to show up and to really be proud to participate in this program? So would love to hear. I know Kelly Manuel shared a little earlier that field trips on Fridays is likely to be a good incentive for attendance and certainly something to promote in your outreach. So tell us a little bit about what you think will be most appealing to families and get them excited to participate. We'll look at those in a second. The second prompt that you see on the slide is really to help support sort of your ongoing reflection as you're thinking about how to balance, what's most exciting about your program that you want to promote with also the critical details and that accurate representation that Catherine was talking about so that families and students really know what they're getting into. And we'll be talking a little bit more in depth about that during tomorrow's webinar focused on student recruitment. So go ahead and add your ideas into the chat. One of the questions that we saw come through earlier was about some of the incentives that you saw, Catherine, for attendance. And I think you started to dig into that a little bit more. My colleague Hillary also shared in the chat the link to Rand's report and kind of directed to pages 39 and 40, which dig into a little bit more around incentives. But Catherine, if there's anything else that you'd want to share around that that'd be great. And we'll take a look at some of these ideas that are starting to come in through the chat here in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, the field trip example is another good one. There were places that only allowed kids to go on the field trip, whether it was a Friday field trip or, at the end of the program, if they had either perfect or some high level of attendance. So yeah, that worked fairly well in some places. It kind of depended on what the field trip was. In Jacksonville, Florida, the field trip was a trip to Disney World at the end of the program. So that served as a really good incentive. And another tool that these programs use to get students to attend regularly was really communicating to parents up front that that was an expectation. Some had parents even sign an attendance pledge that they wouldn't pull their kids out for a football camp or a vacation, so that it wasn't just the kid who wanted to be there, but the parents too understood that this was super important.
That's great. I see a comment from Maria Silva about they'll be using thematic units and really integrating field trips aligned with that as some incentives for students to participate. Catherine is starting to share some information about a summer certification institute that will help build an incentive for some of their older students that are in high school to receive certifications over the summer. So that would be a great thing to encourage participation. I hear some things about library reading programs and ways to support families in supporting students in their literacy development. Thanks, Elizabeth, for that. Great. And so, Catherine, can you just kind of share any other additional advice that you'd want to give to folks as they're thinking about how to balance that, what students and families need to know, the kind of accurate representation of the program, with those exciting elements that are going to really get them enthusiastic to sign up and show up?
Yeah, well, as part of this study, we did some focus groups. I was not involved in this. Other researchers did some focus groups with parents to find out what would attract them to a voluntary summer program for their kids. And it's pretty complicated because a lot of parents have sort of deep-seated notions of what a summer should look like for their kids with, bike riding in a field or whatever they think summer should be. And so acknowledging that and at the same time expressing that these programs will benefit their kids, will be tailored for them, will give them a leg up. I mean, parents want their kids to succeed in school. They want their kids, for the most part, to go to college, to graduate from high school, certainly, and expressing how these programs fit into a parent's goals and wishes for their kids, but also acknowledging that they need to have a fun summer. And so it's not going to be the summer school that we all experienced when we were in school, of sitting in a hot, unair conditioned room for hours on end while a teacher drones on and on. So I think it is good to acknowledge parents' memories of their summer school experience and their desires for their kids, and tap into what they want for their children, and let them know that there will be these fun opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks, Catherine. And I see some other comments coming in around really promoting the enrichment piece, which we'll have a moment to reflect on in a little bit. And so I think we can go ahead and continue on in our discussion, Catherine.
I'm going to pop in real quick to highlight a couple aligned resources available for student recruitment that we have on Texas Home Learning's website. Hi, folks. My name is Brian Dora, and I'm also within the Office of School Programs here at TEA. So 3 opportunities that are specifically aligned to student recruitment. One is the student learning work, or the summer learning work plan tool, which we highlighted at the top of the webinar this morning, has specific sections on student recruitment. Additionally, we will have, as Katie mentioned and Hillary mentioned in the chat, a student recruitment webinar, basically a double click on this topic tomorrow at 11 a.m. Encourage you to join us there, where we'll be walking through a student recruitment template to think through just all of the things associated with student recruitment. And then finally, encourage you to take a look at Texas Home Learning's website /summer, where we're working on a curated list of examples and other resources around student recruitment. Right now, we have a couple examples up there from Grand Prairie ISD and Snyder ISD. So encourage you to take a look there as well.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Okay, let's talk a little bit about selecting teachers for these programs now. So, as I mentioned earlier, in these programs that we studied, the teachers did come from the districts, right? They were the certified academic teachers. And we did see that in the beginning, some of the districts allowed teachers who were not certified for that grade level to teach the third graders. So there were some high school teachers, for example, who wanted to try out teaching elementary kids for the summer. And there were also some high school teachers who focused on math who wanted to teach reading, for example. And at first, the districts were allowing that and happy to have teachers who simply were excited to be there, which I completely agree is important. But when we surveyed and interviewed those teachers at the end of the program, they were like, "Oh God, I didn't know what a third grader was like." It would take them a week or so to figure out third graders' behavior and the standards for third grade. So we quickly shifted to encouraging districts to hire grade level teachers with particular subject expertise. And indeed, when we looked at correlations with outcomes, the kids who had those teachers did better. So we also, as I say in this third bullet, you want teachers who contribute to that positive climate and culture. As I mentioned, that was super important for attendance purposes. So how do you convince a teacher, particularly now, right, after this year, to want to be teaching in these programs, to be excited about it? And basically, we have two recommendations around that. One is at the end of each summer, we surveyed teachers about whether they would come back the next summer, and if so, why? What did they like about the programs? And we found that 90% of the teachers in the programs we studied did want to come back in the next summer. And when we asked them why, this is what they said. So they appreciated being able to try out new curricular materials over the summer. And those materials were given to them in advance and were completely done and organized. The teachers didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to write any lesson plans. They didn't have to develop a scope and sequence. That was done. They got to have the small class sizes I talked about earlier, and they only had to teach one subject. So I don't know how your programs will be structured, but in the programs we studied, they just taught math or they just taught reading. And they had a half day schedule for doing so. So once the rock climbing and swimming began, these academic teachers were done and went home. And they also had supportive adults around them in the program. So on site were the site leaders leading the summer program, as well as social workers and special education teachers and bilingual teachers and others who were providing coaches who were providing the teachers with a lot of support. So advertising those benefits plus appealing to, as I said earlier, the importance of summer, how helpful these programs can be, how much they work, should get, a pool of teachers who buy into that mission and also understand that you're trying to make this an easy experience for them. And all of the programs provided training to teachers before the summer program began. And we found that to be incredibly important. So that's when the teachers see the curriculum for the first time, they get their hands on it, they see it used and modeled by whoever's providing that training, ideally, whoever within the district curriculum department developed that curriculum. They are reminded to protect instructional time. Remember, I said earlier that you want to hit a certain number of hours of math or reading, and both if you're doing both. So we saw that about 85% of the planned time for those subjects was actually lost to transitions between classes or chit chat about one's weekend. Now, there has to be some chit chat, obviously. You want to have a relationship between the teachers and the students, but reminding them of the urgency of the summer program and how they don't have a lot of time to help kids get ready for the next school year is important to do during that training. And this is, again, probably another no duh recommendation, but we saw that the quality of instruction was also correlated with students' outcomes. And what mattered in that quality of instruction was if teachers were going around. I mean, if they only have, 12 kids, say, in a class, they can really make sure that each kid gets the content or the skill before they move on to the next content or skill. And so taking the time to do that so that kids don't fall behind during the summer or get lost was really important in terms of positive student outcomes. And in addition to targeting the teachers during this training, bring in those special ed teachers, bilingual teachers, paraprofessionals, whoever else will be in the classroom. Also really appreciated seeing the curricular materials ahead of time and knowing exactly what their role was going to be.
So similar to the last section, we also have a number of resources available on Texas Home Learning's website related to staffing and PD. Also, I'll just highlight here that a lot of what Catherine is talking through on the curricular resource side works well with Texas Home Learning products as they're working on summer units as well. But for staffing and PD, we have a webinar on Wednesday as essentially a double click into this topic, as well as some district examples, other resources, and a separate section within the work planning tool as well.
Thanks, Brian. All right, I'm going to say a little bit now about use of time during the program, which I've already previewed. So we do recommend offering the program for at least 5 weeks. I don't know if that will be feasible for you all, given where you are and your planning. But if if you're not doing that this summer, I would try to plan for that in subsequent summers, because we did see that minimum dosage or number of hours that kids needed in order to perform well in math and reading. But these programs were focused on both math and reading, and programs don't have to, of course. But we do recommend scheduling at least 3 hours in each day for academics if you are going to be focusing on 2 subjects, acknowledging the time it takes for transitions. In some of these programs, they ended up having to schedule a lunch in the middle of an academic block in order to make it work. And that just threw off that entire academic block. The teachers basically came back from lunch and retaught everything they had taught before lunch. And then again, emphasizing the importance and the urgency of using that time in the summer well.
We'll have a webinar next Wednesday on this, the 7th of April, about scheduling. And then also want to point out that we do have a couple of district examples of summer schedules that are aligned to the research here. And so I encourage you to take a look at those and how they have translated essentially those research best practices into an existing summer schedule.
Great. Thanks, Brian. All right, let's talk a little bit about the curriculum and its instruction. So what we saw that were promising practices included engaging experts, and I alluded to this before. So really working with the curriculum experts in your district to develop the curriculum. Don't leave it to teachers. They do not want to do it. They don't have time to do it. And I know you in particular have a ton of resources on this, as Brian has mentioned. So I think you'll find all the materials you need for your summer programs, which should be aligned to your school year standards and to the particular needs of the students you're serving, right? Obviously, due to COVID, we know from national surveys that teachers have not covered as much material as they had planned to, either in the spring of last year when all of this began or over this past school year. And you can't make it all up. It can't be a remedial summer program that goes back over everything that was lost. There's just not enough time. So, but you can really focus on what the kids really need to know for the next grade level, right? So accelerating their learning, figuring out which kiddos are going to be attending your programs. You probably won't have a lot of assessment data on them to know where they are, but you'll have some. So looking at their specific needs, and then acknowledging that even if you're focusing on a narrow band of students, let's say if we were in a summer in which you had state assessment data and you wanted to look at kids who are just the kids who are below proficient in a grade level in math. There's still going to be wide variation, right? Some will be way below proficient, some will be just shy of it, some will understand fractions but not measurement of, and some will understand measurement but not fractions. So make sure that the curriculum has enough activities to differentiate even within whatever band of skill level that you're targeting. And then ideally, the people running the programs, the site leaders, would be going in and out of classrooms, making sure the curriculum is working, answering teacher questions. And the programs that we studied had particular coaches from the district who were also out there in the summer helping teachers as well. And I've already talked about serving students in small class sizes. So I'm going to move now to the enrichment activities that these programs provided. Again, the swimming, flag football, putting on a play, fun stuff. So these programs provided those kinds of activities in 3 different ways, right? In some, the same kinds of district teachers who were hired for math and reading also taught those programs. Like some district teachers were experts in yoga, for example. So they offered a yoga class during the summer. In other districts, the districts contracted directly with community-based organizations in the community who offered, the rock climbing, which clearly the district didn't have a rock climbing gym, and the sand volleyball pits, and the kids would be bused to those places in the afternoon. And that worked well too. And a third way in which they did it is the district simply wanted to outsource all of this. They didn't have time or resources to focus on this. So they'd find an intermediary in their city, like Big Thought, for example, in Dallas. And that intermediary then contracted with all of the local CBOs to come in and provide an arts experience or what have you. And we found that all 3 of those models worked. The kids were more or less happy given these arrangements, and things went off without a hitch. One benefit to working with the CBOs is that in some of these communities, those CBOs had their own funding. So the district didn't have to pay them to come into the summer program because they had their own source of funding through 21st Century or what have you. So that was a benefit just simply in terms of costs. But you want to make sure your enrichment instructors do have strong content knowledge. You don't want to bring someone in who doesn't have enough material for the entire time or has never taught dance before, and they're trying to learn it at the same time the kids are. That leads to a lot of bored kids and therefore misbehavior. And speaking of, you want to make sure that the enrichment experiences model the academic experiences or reflect them in terms of whatever behavior management strategy you're using. If you're using positive behavior approaches during the academic classes, you want to make sure the enrichment instructors are trained on that exact same approach so that there's consistency for the kids. And again, keeping class sizes small here too in the enrichment activities was important for engagement of the kids, for the ability of the enrichment instructors to manage behavior. So I'm going to stop here again and turn it over again to Katie.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So seeing a lot of really good sharing and questions in the chat. We'd love for you to continue sharing. We've heard some great examples of enrichment that you're planning, and we'd love to hear how you're learning from students and families about what they're most interested in, so that can inform decisions you're making around enrichment. So if you can drop ideas in the chat around that. I'm going to share one question before we move forward. Catherine, we had a question around just like teacher recruitment tips. So as you're thinking about, academic teachers and enrichment teachers, you shared a little bit about the criteria and skills to look for, but just recognizing it's been a hard year. Do you have any suggestions around the best strategies for getting the best teachers?
Sure. Well, it used to be in the more olden times that, at least in the districts we were working with, that union bargaining agreements, which I don't think are as prevalent in Texas, would prescribe that a district had to hire the most senior teachers first for summer positions. And all of the programs that we worked with their unions to change that so they could instead focus on the teachers who really wanted to be there, which wasn't always the most senior teachers. So that would be one recommendation I would make, is to see if, how much leeway a program leader has to identify teachers. And then the program leaders in these districts didn't always know the teachers. I think some of you are coming from smaller districts, but these are pretty big urban districts. So they would reach out to principals to get them to nominate teachers who were really enthusiastic. And in this case, they could be nominating teachers who might not be as burned out as others for whatever reason. So working with others like principals to try to nominate and seek out those teachers who would be a good fit for the program is another recommendation that we would make.
That's great. Thanks, Catherine. So why don't we go ahead and go forward, and we'll pull a couple other questions and comments before we turn over to our closing part of the session in a moment.
All right.
And just a quick highlight here, we do have resources specific to the summer unit overviews, or if they are not up on the website right now, they will be by the end of this week. We also have webinars next week, all throughout next week, that are product specific on the academic side, and then an enrichment webinar Wednesday the 7th. So I encourage you to take a look there.
Great. Okay, so we are not going to talk about costs today, which is the last section. So our last section today will be on how these programs created a positive climate for their kids. So obviously, having a positive climate is important, right? We saw that it was highly correlated with student attendance. It's really a driver of student enjoyment, which gets them to come back day after day. And as I said earlier, what we really looked for when we were using a rubric to measure climate, which I will admit is not easy, and I'm not saying we did this perfectly, but we looked at the quality of staff to student interaction. So how were students greeted when they came in the morning? Were staff brusquely walking away, or did they stop and say hello? And maybe they wouldn't do this post-COVID, but back then they were giving students hugs and high fives and really welcoming them and sitting with them at lunch and during any kind of outdoor breaks or recess time. So what we were looking for is clarity in terms of, did all staff associated with the program understand what was expected of them in terms of creating a positive climate, and then consistency in adhering to those standards and the warmth they exuded towards students, and how much students and staff both appeared to be engaged in the program and with each other. So the way that these programs implemented that positive site culture was to model during that pre-program training time how staff were expected to interact with students, again, during transitions, arrival, departures, meal times, and make sure that all staff, including enrichment, had training on whatever kind of behavior management technique was going to be used in the program. And then that site leaders, I mentioned earlier, doing classroom observations, but that they should also be out in the hallways and there during arrival and dismissal, so that they're helping to set this positive climate or culture, and also supporting staff and reminding them of the standards that they had set. In addition to the special education teachers and the coaches and the bilingual teachers, these programs also had social workers and behavior management specialists, as they were called, who were in these programs providing more one-on-one support with students who might be struggling. In some cases, social workers set up like girls' club lunches to talk with a small group of girls over lunch throughout the summer about relationship issues and other things. So these were other ways the districts were trying to make sure they had a welcoming and engaging climate for the students.
Great. So we also have a climate and culture webinar on Thursday, the 1st. at 11 a.m. as well, and are working on some examples on the website to get that up there and running, in addition to the work planning tool sections that we have. And so encourage you to take a look at all three of those as they relate to climate and culture. And I think we're going to pop over, we might have time for one last question here for Catherine, Katie, if anything's come across.
Sure, Catherine, there was a question just around if in the NSLP there were any special ed classes, and maybe you could go ahead and address that in the chat so that we can move into the next looking at the work plan tool. There were some questions, Andrew, that I think you might be able to respond to about whether or not there'll be a Spanish curriculum available through Texas Home Learning.
Sure.
Great.
I'll address that question in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine, for the overview of the study. I know it's just sticking the toe in the water in terms of the depth of what you all have done. So I also encourage folks to go to RAND's website, take a look at those reports. We can link out to those as well on texashomelearning.com/summer. So I encourage you to take a look, but thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we just heard about a lot of the different components that we know from research are very important to infuse in high quality summer learning programs. And so what we have as a resource is a summer learning work plan tool. And what this does is essentially take those research-based practices and put them into a work plan for you to help plan for your summer programs. So I'm going to pop over to texashomelearning.org here and show you where you can find that. And so this is texashomelearning.org/summer. We have the summer learning framework here at the top. All of the webinar links and registration links here. You might have already visited this if you are registered for this webinar. And then right underneath, we have the summer learning framework and planning resources. The first resource here is the summer learning work plan tool. And what this does is this aims to capture all of the main key activities that are involved in planning for summer. And so this is the link over here on Texas Home Learning's website, takes you to this work plan tool. We have separated out, given the timing of where we are within the school year, a 3-month expedited planning phase. And so this tab captures all of the key activities within each section and where we estimate that they would be taking place, given kind of a 3-month timeline of April, May, and June for planning. And then certainly there'll be some overlap for execution of June into July and early and late August. The 9 planning categories that we have as the summer learning framework are down here on the column B. So as we do these webinars over the course of the next 2 weeks, we will be diving in deeper into each of these components. And then each of the categories on the left also link out to an additional category specific work plan tool in Google Docs. And so this is an opportunity for you to take a look at the planning specific items for the next couple months, given where we are in the school year, and assign out different tasks to different folks and use this in the way that is most useful for you. So these are, again, separated out into the categories that we have. So today we talked through design and planning, and then tomorrow we're talking through student recruitment. So these sections are all included in this planning tool. We have those planning tools available for design and planning, for enrichment and academics, and then also for operations. Additionally, if you are looking at this tool, you will notice that we have a bunch of other tabs over here to the right. These are not included to overwhelm anyone, but they are essentially the deep dive into each section, and they are assuming a full year planning timeline, so a 12-month planning timeline. As we mentioned at the top of the call, planning for summer really starts in September in a perfect scenario, in a perfect state. And so these separate tabs are meant to capture that situation where you are planning starting in September for the following summer. and capturing all of these kind of recommended and essential tasks according to each key activity. So take a look at that if that's helpful. But again, given where we are in the calendar rather, for this summer, we see this tab, the 3-month expedited planning phase, as the most helpful tab for you all. And then again, these link out to a summer learning work planning tool that will give you a more spring-centric planning timeline. Additionally, I want to highlight a couple things back on texasHomeLearning.org/summer. So as you scroll down from the Summer Learning Framework and Planning Resources, you'll see we've separated out 3 different categories: design and implementation, academics and enrichment, and operations. Each of these 3 have then the webinar, the associated webinar. We have tools and resources that are associated, and then district examples. So for example, tomorrow we have student recruitment. That webinar, you can register here. We will post the recording here as well once it is ready. And then associated tools and resources that we will both talk through during the webinar, but also feel free to take a look through. Finally, we're looking at district examples over here. If in addition to what we have here, if you have any good examples that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to email texasHomeLearning@tea.texas.gov, and we'll take a look and get them posted here as well for statewide support there. And then the last thing I do want to highlight under designing for high quality summer learning is this additional resource here, the Wallace Foundation Summer Learning Toolkit. This is basically a comprehensive suite of resources. I think there are 50+ different resources and templates that Katie and Hillary on this call and Rand Research informed Katie and Hillary, and Learning Agenda really did a lot of work around creating and designing these templates and resources. So a more comprehensive kind of suite of resources in addition to what we're talking through with the TEA's Summer Learning Framework. All right, let me pop back over here to the deck. So quick reminders here as we get close to finishing out. We have webinars over the course of this week. Tomorrow is student recruitment at 11, staffing and PD on Wednesday, and then climate and culture on Thursday. Academics and enrichment will take place next week. So we have product specific webinars for each of the products from Texas Home Learning that are providing a summer learning unit. And so encourage you to take a look here. We'll also have these posted after they are held as well on the THL website. And then finally, next week as well, we'll have an operations overview. So I know there was a question around budgeting in the chat. We'll be talking more about that on April 6th, and then master scheduling and summer site operations next week as well. I do want to take a moment as we're talking through Texas Home Learning resources and the potential to use different products with Texas Home Learning over the course of the summer. We also have an additional opportunity that you might want to explore, which is the COVID Recovery Instructional Materials Support Initiative. We affectionately call this CRIMSI here. There are 3 open opportunities right now. The first is spring adoption coaching for 21-22. And this would be for anyone who's looking for essentially a coach to help them think through any adoption considerations for 21-22 school year. The second, which is particularly pertinent for the group on this webinar, is a summer pilot. So if you are interested in piloting one of the Texas Home Learning products this summer, we have some additional supports that you can apply for and be a part of this pilot, where we'll have additional professional development for teachers, teacher stipends as well, and printed materials that we would be able to provide for participating districts who are looking to pilot these products. Quick flag that the application is due April 9th for these first 2 opportunities. And then finally, there's also a 21-22 full year pilot, similar to the summer pilot. That application is due a bit later, but I encourage you to take a look at texashomeLearning.org/CRIMSI, CRIMSI. And with that, would love to, I mean, we are essentially at time. I don't know, Katie and Hillary, if there's anything burning that popped up in questions that we can address real quick. But otherwise, sorry, let me, are there any burning questions that would be helpful to address real quick?
I think most have been addressed in the chat, and Andrew shared the link back to Texas Home Learning to register for any of the other webinars that we talked about happening this week and for the following weeks.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope to see many of you later this week and next week as well in the subsequent webinars that we have. Like we mentioned as well, if you have any resources or feedback that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to email us at texashomelearning@tea.texas.gov. All right.
Brian, there's a question that came through about if they can sign up just one campus for the pilot, or does it have to be the whole district?
It can be one campus, yes.
Even with Crimsey, it doesn't even need to be an entire campus. It could just be a grade level within a campus that y'all are looking for some extra support on. So again, Crimsey gives you extra support with the THL instructional materials. All those materials are available free for you to use as you wish. If you want extra support, stipends, and materials for this summer, take a look at Crimsey on our website. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful rest of your week, and thanks for all you do for Texas students.
Brian, there's another question coming in about stipends. Are they for each teacher?
Yes, for the summer pilot, it would be for each participating teacher. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thanks for sending that out, Shaylin. And thank you everyone for joining us.